You know, when you're talking about how you can't really change someone's mind in one conversation, I really thought through why. And it's part of the reason why I already told you. But another thing is people like I've learned from Jung that an ideology is like has a deep phenomenal pattern, but it's a low resolution. It really is low resolution. Because think about it, capitalist can be localized into different contexts, and I've researched that extensively. And people's experiences engage in a dialogue with an ideology. And so the ideology is low resolution, but your experiences fill in the gaps. And a good example of that is there's a lot of examples, but one is racism. Like there are many different ways you can approach the topic of racism. Like you could define racism as treating, like you can have a colorblind definition. You could have an institutional like approach where like, oh, these people, this percentage has this much of these positions versus this percentage. You can have an IQ, like you can think of IQ. Some like if you're in like a third world country, you have the lower IQs, and if you're in an industrial country, you could have so many different approaches. You can even have a deconstructionist approach by Derrida. I mean, like there's so many different ways you can approach it. And the thing is, so when you talk about racism, you can't really talk about it because you not only, in my experience, if you take someone's position and if you, like when I talk to someone about politics, I don't really do that because I don't know, thank you. But if you flip over that presupposition and you say, why do you think that? Like really, like why? You often find this sequence or a network of stories about their experiences and how that interlocks with their other views. And there's like there's like a pattern that catalyzes them all together. And it's not necessarily like well organized, but I think that's a good way of approaching it. So I think we're not really rational creatures. We're more like spiritual and symbolic creatures in my view.
No, you're totally right. And the point about racism is a really good one because, I've wondered this too, because, well, right now it seems like there's a lot of racist stuff, but it also seems like a lot of people are getting called racists who are very confused by that term. They're like, I'm not a racist. I've never used the N-word. Like, that is what baby boomers and down think of racism, because the idea of racism is a relatively new one. I mean, I think it's from the 50s basically on is when it was a term.
The racism in the 60s was like on the basis of your race, get out of my restaurant. Today it can be a microaggression. Like I can see why a boomer in the 60s who, even like if they're a hardcore protester who says, I don't like segregation, and then when they're 70, they're accused of microaggressions, why they would collapse over laughing. Like, you don't know what racism is, dude. Racism is like getting shot or like being lynched or like getting kicked out of the restaurant and beaten up. Like but I'm not saying a microaggression isn't legitimate, but I'm pointing out it's localized within different experiences.
Yeah. Or systemic racism, right? Like this whole thing here is a problem, or like generalized language, or supporting people who are even maybe more overtly racist or like, hurtful in their racism. That's all racism. But like, if we have a narrow definition of like, I didn't hit anybody with a stick, I didn't sick a fire dog on somebody, I didn't firebomb a church, I didn't use the N-word, I'm not racist. I just love having Confederate flags on the back of my truck. Like, I cannot hear you. Let's see. Let me pull up the chat real quick. So yeah, I mean this is good. This is good stuff, you guys. I see your text, Bonju, but I can't hear you. Well, let us know if you need help sorting that out or getting online to talk.
Sent a video on structural racism, Patricia Rose from Brown University. It's a great video. If you guys are interested in it, you should watch it. It details things like white flight, ideology, and institutions.
Yeah. I'm not racist. I just wanted to move into a gated community. Yeah, why'd you want to move? Well, all those other people were moving into my neighborhood. Okay, that's racism. Like but nobody got called the N-word in the process. But it's racism, and it ties back to redlining and all these horrible practices, racist practices that we've done for a really long time.
Like the criminal justice system and recidivism. Like if you arrested once, like thrown in jail once, you're gonna get like over and over again. Yeah. Even researching elephants, for example, even if you think that even like in elephants, for example, shows that if there's a war amongst older elephants, older male elephants, and they all die out, the younger male elephants are much more likely to grow up like violent and aggressive. It's because it's for a few reasons. One is that there's not older male elephants to socialize them, but also they saw their parents like die in a fight, so they probably think, "Uh-oh, this is what's going to happen to me." I mean, so you laugh at it's
Yeah.
like,
No, I'm not laughing at you. I'm sorry. The professor was combing his hair, and I just thought that was just fun.
I totally was. I got some nappiness going on in the back of my head there.
Wait, did you just say nappiness?
Yeah, I got curly hair, man. My hair gets, especially if I let it grow and I go down to the beach. It's like, dude, I could be looking like Bob Ross if I, cut it the right way. Yeah, okay, so what you're saying about elephants, super interesting and is actually a really good thing. We should all bear that, the elephant analogy about trauma and kind of like persona or personality as they grow out of that trauma.
My dad
from
was
that
thrown
trauma.
in prison, and my uncle was thrown in prison, and I live in a low income community. I'm gonna think it's just the way things are supposed to be, and I can see why it would perpetuate itself. Hey, are we gonna talk about?
Yeah. With like, so just bear that idea in mind, everybody, when we're looking at different people groups, especially the Russians post World War II, because they were in a battle to not be annihilated. Like Hitler wanted to kill all the Slavic people too. He hated them almost as much as he hated Jews. Like they were within feet of Moscow, and the Germans killed so many of them, and they were basically all alone. And so when they come out of the war, they're thinking they're very suspicious and aggressive and like, ah.
I hear a voice in the background speaking.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay. I was gonna say earlier that I think now the biggest problem is people are more afraid of being called racist than actually being racist. So it slows the movement of progression.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. It's semantics. It's like we're talking about words. We're not really talking about the motives of your heart here. Those are different things. They're different things. Well, okay, this is great. This is great discussion. We can pick it back up later tonight if we want to, or
let's talk
the
about
next few weeks as it comes up.
Talk about group projects though.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. So I want to spend the next half hour or so talking about group projects, and then we'll take a break and come back in and get into some material. So group projects. I was talking with Noah earlier during office hours about his ideas for a project, and I thought, okay, well, my plan was to wait until after test one to do it because, well, just like the notes and the material that we're looking at, the project's also brand new. Like nobody's done a project like this, so it's just one more thing to be like, and have anxiety about. But I'm not going to say it's easier than writing a paper. It's more enjoyable though. And I'm not looking for lots of academic language and super formal writing. I mean, I probably stay away from contractions and stuff like that for the most part, but we're not nitpicky on those things. And I'm not looking for some high bar in terms of writing. One of the reasons is it's only a suggestion you have had English 101 by the time you take this course, but that's not everybody in the class has had English 101. So it's very hard to gauge people on writing in this class because there's so many different levels where we're all at in terms of writing. So the writing matters. And if you're in a group and writing's not your strong suit, do a little bit of it, but have the person that likes to write, work up on the verbiage and stuff. You're pulling in material and research and adding things. And the way research for this will work in the project, it can look pretty much like my Satori's. There can be videos, pictures, maps, charts and graphs. You can embed a website in there if you want. If it's a video that's like a public source video on YouTube, you don't have to like cite it or anything. It's right there. I can just click on it. Like, I got it. I know where it is. If it's a map, you should probably put like, oh, I found this here, you know, or something maybe in the title. They usually leave a little description part for the picture. And then in terms of like research and statistics, if you're like quoting somebody or you looked up a study and don't necessarily have a chart or map to go with it, but you're just writing some of that stuff out, or you want to quote somebody, in text quotations is fine with me. Or, you know, if you reference a book, just highlight the title of the book and then put a hyperlink in there that'll take me to Amazon for the book, or the Library of Congress, or Google Books, or, you know, like whatever. It's way easier in terms of like the research documentation part of it. So don't think of it as a research project that way. And you don't have a thesis statement with like structure and paragraphs that way. But you do have to have a specific theme, which is like a thesis statement that you're going to like focus on and try to like go all the way through this 150 years looking at, that will guide the rest of the things you're doing. So, and maybe one of the best ways to do that, like with a thesis statement, is to ask a question, right? Like if your question is, how has the American family changed over the last 150 years? Like, okay, well, that's a good question. How has that changed? And you might not have an answer for that yet. Like you might not be able to see like, oh, there was a few different like phases where the family looked like this, and then it looked like that, and then it looked, and you're talking about demographics and things changing and single parenthood and no fault divorce laws and all these things that are going to change the way that looks, to where by the end of it, you might be able to sum up pretty well, like, okay, the American family changes over 150 years because of blah, 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 all these factors. And it kind of unfolds in a few different, few different phases or sections. So having something like that at the beginning of the timeline is, well, it's helpful for me or anybody else looking at it. So I got a clear picture of what I'm going to be scrolling through. Yeah, so that's just helpful. Have that at the beginning. Now, in terms of getting there and getting to a group project, I want to just brainstorm a little bit. I'm going to pull up OneNote, and let's see, I'm going to do it under collaboration space. So I'm making another section next to the student notes sections that's going to say group projects. And, I'll share my screen so you guys can see what I'm doing. All right, there we go. Okay, so if y'all can see this, right? You can see my screen. So we'll take some time and for those of you that have ideas or an inkling or well, I think I might like to do it on this, but I still don't really understand the project. We can throw these up here and start talking about them and brainstorming them. And then for those of you that have no clue and you're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I want to look at. Some of these will start to sound like enticing to you. Like, oh, that sounds cool. I could do a project on that. Oh, I like that person too. Like, oh, I could be in a group with them. So I'm going to have you guys go into OneNote, tonight, like over the next week, and try to self-select what group you're going to be in and kind of what the focus is on that. And so in here, you'll have space to expand on that, right? You guys can kind of work out details and some stuff right here on this page without having to start an email thread or anything like that. And we will inevitably be adding more possible topics and subjects to this list as the Monday class gets this video and can go in and add stuff or, email me about things that we add in there.
Yes, sir.
So yeah,
So do we just so do we have to sign our names of which group we're gonna be in the topic or something?
No, it won't actually even be that you don't even have to do that much work. You can literally put your name under the group, but you don't have to do anything else than that. So let's try it this way. Why don't you guys just shoot out your ideas? And I might have to ask for a little bit of clarification, but I just want to brainstorm and get the ideas out on paper, even the crazy ones, even if you're like, I want to do this one. And as you're saying it, you're like, well, that's stupid. There's no judgment. We're just brainstorming and getting stuff up here. So for those of you who have thought about this a little bit or a lot, and you've got some ideas or possible suggestions, hit me. I'm going to start throwing them up here on OneNote.
Sure. Should I announce my topic? Or
Yeah. We just talked about yours. So give it to us in a sentence or two. And this is the hard thing, right? Try to boil that down into a sentence of this is the topic.
Okay, here. I'm going to make it as a question.
Good. Okay.
How has the nature of economic value been catalyzed in American institutions since 1865 to 2016?
So if I'm trying to write a shorthand version of that, I'm putting down shifting economic values as they relate to American institutions.
Or you could just put here, I'm typing in the chat, economic.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it'd be real quick.
Okay, that's more clever. That's actually more clever.
Where is my chat? I'm split screen right now. There we go. Chat. Okay, economic values and American institutions, which is a great, we had a long talk about this. This is a great topic, and actually there's a ton that the group can write on in this, even if you guys aren't econ people. Noah is. He's got a lot wrapped up on the economic stuff, but the project is not just solely that one topic, right? It's that topic with all the other big important pieces that shade that and fit around that. So even if you're like, oh, I don't mind economics, but I don't feel like I know a ton about it. That's cool. It's a learning project. So it's well, dive deep into it a little bit and see what you come up with, see what you figure out, which will be more rewarding actually probably than if you do a topic you're like, well, I like this. I did a report on this in my senior high class, okay, so economic values and American institutions, and we'll come back and unpack all these a little bit.
Yeah, just change to economic value, not economic values. It's
economic value. Yes.
No, it's small, but I don't know. It seems important. Value.
No, it's a totally different thing. You're right. It totally changes the nature of that topic.
Can we do American, oh my God, America and I?
Explain.
What do you think America represents to you? Or not to you, but just in general, what represents America?
You can totally do that. And there's a few different ways you could approach that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll come back to them. I want to talk about that. So I'm going to put down what is American? Ooh. Okay, cool. Very good.
What kind of topics? So what kind of topics are we supposed to do anyway? I'm a little lost.
Any topic.
That's
the terrifying thing about the project. There's not a lot of guidelines on it. It's hey, what do you want to go research and get into for the second half of the semester? Yeah.
Professor, this is Eddie. I'm interested in law and order.
Okay.
I want to see the different organizations and groups, like I know Secret Service, FBI, but how did the police department start in cities and stuff like that from the 1865? I
Perfect.
know the Western was, sheriff in town, but I don't know. That's just an idea. And the other thing I'm interested is vaccines throughout
Okay.
history.
Oh, that's a good one.
Professor, in regards to the Law and Order of the Police one, what about something along the lines of just how policing has changed, or, both good and bad from, 1865 until now?
Yeah. I don't want to get too deep into it to stop the flow of brainstorming, but this will help maybe generate some stuff with folks' ideas. When you get into that topic, also depending on who gets in the group,
Yeah.
you guys you'll wind up narrowing your focus, like pretty early on.
Yeah.
It'll become apparent like, oh, this is really a bigger theme than I thought over here. And it, like, you could go, I want to do Law and Order, and like a week or two into researching and working with other people, you might come back and be like, I want to look at the deep state and this kind of like, like the CIA and that kind, like maybe you're like, I want to look at that and how all that changed, and which is different than Law and Order. That's the base of the subject. And you might even have, say you've got a group of 5 people and 2 people want to do this and 3 people want to go do that. You're free to, you guys can go do Law and Order over here on, sheriffs and the FBI and that kind of stuff. And you guys can go do the deep state stuff over here. So yes,
Well,
perfect.
that's what I mean. Like my interest is more like how did they solve crime? When the crime lab started? When did DNA started? That's my trajectory, like how it started and
Perfect.
where we at right now with our technology.
Okay,
Hey,
perfect.
guys,
Professor, I have a question.
Yeah.
For our group projects, I had an idea of whether to do like, how sociology has been throughout the years and how it's evolved.
How sociology, like the study of sociology, or like how society has changed and evolved?
Well, that's kind of like where I'm at. I'm not sure if I want to look about like how the society has been, but also like the study.
Okay, cool. Very good.
You
We'll
guys,
come back around to that
first
one.
I want to say,
Professor,
Yeah.
can we do the Holocaust?
Yes.
hey guys, to whoever
Excuse me,
said about the American narrative, what does America mean? Like what's the common American narrative? I just posted some work done by Sunstein. He's a legal scholar. I haven't read it, but I remember reading when I was reading Sunstein's works, like I traced over it. So you should check that out if you want an authentic source.
That's great. I saw that. Thank you, Noah, for sharing that. You can, of course, absolutely do the Holocaust. And here's one of the challenging things.
There's a
Pretty
lot to
much
talk about.
any
for the Holocaust.
subject you wind up picking, you're going to have to address and reckon with the world wars, the Holocaust, probably nuclear, fission, and then like even stuff like the moon landing. And you're like, what? Like, if I'm doing something on dance and art, why the hell do I have to talk about the moon landing? And I might even just leave it up to you to figure out why. But there are reasons why. Like, they're game changers for pretty much everything. So it might be not a direct connection. It might not even be a secondary connection. But there are points of relativity to that are going to shape and change things, right? So you can't just look at the Holocaust. Everybody has to kind of deal with the Holocaust and address it in some way. If you wanted to go deep into the Holocaust, you would need to look at it would be a part of a larger theme, right? Either on like, you're looking at like human rights and the government, maybe you're looking at anti-Semitism and racism. Maybe you're just trying to look at like how power grows, over this 150 years, which the Holocaust is a very good, it's a horrible picture of power growing and people, you're like, wow, how did we get here? But it kind of feels like some of that's going on right now. Like, how did we get here? Like, this is crazy. Oh, that's going to happen like it did back then too. Like when people take power, there's just certain patterns that emerge, but how they use the institutions and those kinds of things changes. So yeah, you could do the Holocaust, but it would have to be framed in something that is 150 years long. And you could only cover that in proportion to the 150 years. So if you've got like 1,000 words leading up to 1933, and then 1,000 words after 1945, and 50,000 words right here on the Holocaust, it's like, oh, you're loud. There we go. You're like, that's not a very good timeline project. That's like some context for the Holocaust. But you can't, like, it'd be hard to talk about the Holocaust over 150 years because it doesn't even happen until the mid 20th century. And then it's over by 1945. Of course, the ramifications of it we're still living with and how it built up to that.
Perhaps one could, forgive me, but one could say, what is the legacy of the Holocaust?
Right.
No, because like you could say like, well, how is it, like, how do we remember it? To what degree do we not remember it?
Yeah.
But I agree with our professor, because 1865 to Holocaust, the link, you can make some links, but you can't really make it together in the compelling narrative. Like good luck with that. Like Germany wasn't even formed in 1865, so
right, it wasn't even a country.
Yeah, so I wouldn't recommend doing it unless you take a very specific analysis. And if you took a specific analysis, chances are you wouldn't be able to do it anyways. I mean, I don't want to discourage. Maybe you can do a history of genocide. There's a historian named Norman Naimark. He has covered genocide over the course of centuries. I'd recommend his scholarship. You can cover genocide.
Yeah. And if this was like a European or world history course, you could probably just do like, how did we get to the Holocaust? And then what is the ramifications of that for the last, 85 years? And you could do a good project on that. It'd be a little bit different because it's kind of centered around one event and like moving outward from it, but tracing all of that in the build up to that, and then showing how we deal with it and the perceptions of it, and then Holocaust denial and everything would be great. But so much of that is outside of the purview of kind of American history. Like and I tried to talk about this for a minute last week because somebody had asked, like, why do we have all this stuff on like anti-Semitism in Russia and Europe and the beginning of Zionism and stuff in an American history course, which I felt like, well, good observation that you saw, like, this doesn't look like it fits or is never in the other American history books. It's because the Holocaust is unintelligible to us if we don't understand more of the history of that. So if we just get to 1945 and I'm like, yeah, then the Allied troops rolled in and they discovered all these camps and then the Nuremberg trials. It's just like, huh? Okay, well, that's unfathomable. I can't really even imagine that. Moving on, like we won't get it and we won't understand it. And then with the stuff about Zionism, it's like, yeah, that's really important for understanding our Middle Eastern policy and kind of American evangelicalism and all kinds of different things that started over 100 years ago. So these things are germane to American history, but to go into a deep thing on the Holocaust it'd be easier if you were in a non-American history class, like a world history class. But
genocide's a possibility. I mean, right?
Yeah. While I'm saying this, I'm thinking there's a few different threads that you might be able to do, like based on and around the Holocaust that would not necessarily take you out of America for like half of your timeline. And some of those things might be like the relationship to science and power, right? Like, which is you can talk about all kinds of stuff there. It could be like you could just be studying the growth of hatred and hate groups or something like that. So those things could fit, with the Holocaust being a big, big centerpiece to that. But yeah, if you're looking at like, man, well, how did we get to there? We don't get there without technology. You can't kill 6 million people without technology. Like the craziest warrior in the world couldn't have killed 100,000 people. The biggest army in the world probably couldn't have killed 100,000 people. Like, it's such a game changer. And, with the world wars, which we're moving into right now, is it's all about technology and people's conceptions of technology and what they think the boundaries and parameters and limitations for war and warfare are very old and outdated. So when they all go onto the battlefield and there's machine guns, all of a sudden it's like, uh-oh, we need a new playbook. And then more people start dying, kind of like in the Holocaust, then it's really fathomable. Like I can't, even for Americans, right? Americans that die in World War II. I think it's around 100,000 maybe. That's crazy. I can't think of 100,000 American men just dying and being gone, like, let alone 6 million Jewish people. It just seems, how is that possible? But then when we like hold all that stuff up with technology and see how technology helps us, but it also like helps crazy people accomplish their goals too. So like that's a major theme just in history, but would be really germane to the Holocaust as maybe one of the most stark examples of something like that, which of course happens at the exact same time as the atomic bomb, which is another like, we should probably feel more national shame over that than we do. Like, what did we just do to people twice? Civilians? Not okay. So like these kinds of things about science and our own morality are there's so many things you could pull from that. Yeah, what was the question?
Sir, wasn't the nuking of Japan, while horrible and a tragedy, wasn't actually justified because more people would have died if we had invaded on land? In fact, I've read that after we nuked, many of the military generals still wanted to fight on in Japan because they were fanatic. Yeah, so, but the emperor was like, yeah, we just got nuked. We're probably outmatched. So, like,
yeah, no, I mean, it's effective, and it's an effective way to win the war. But here, just foreshadowing a little bit of what we'll talk about in the origins of the Cold War. When you win a war, you fight battles and kind of reclaim ground and push the boundary markers back and until you're in Berlin or something like that. Well, in Asia, the Japanese are all over the entire Asian coast, colonizing. And when the war ends abruptly, some of them stay in place and like keep fighting. You know, there's stories about like these soldiers isolated on islands that are like, a boat shows up in 1960 and they're like, yeah, like attack people. Like, oh, dude, the war's been over for a long. You didn't have a radio, did you, buddy? Like, oh, but there's also like, so that happens, but they also leave immediately, leaving giant power vacuums in all these countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, Southeast Asia, China, Korea. This is where the Korean conflict comes from. So it's like, oh, that's not even, and that's by far not the worst part about the nuclear bomb. But even in a pragmatic sense, it's like, well, if we would have continued the plan of just like a coalition joint invasion of Japan with Russia, we wouldn't have had a Cold War. right? There wouldn't have been this like mad hysteria around the world about atomic weapons and America having them. There'd be no power vacuums, and America would not have like done an about 180 on Russia, on the Soviet Union, as soon as the war was over. Like getting the Truman, I mean, was pretty upfront about it. Like getting the bomb, he showed up at the, I think it's the Potsdam conference. Like, oh yeah, we're here to negotiate. I don't think so. I don't care. I don't care what you guys want. We got a bomb. Like, oh, this is unilateral America, no longer working with people, and straight up like not just like turning our back on our ally for World War II, Russia. Like we sent them weapons and vehicles. Like they were part of they were the allied force that defeated Hitler. But like we didn't just turn our back on them. We went, there is a global conspiracy. Like we need to like fight them and communism at every turn we can, which was really largely perpetuated by one of those Germans that we brought over and repatriatized and made them Americans because we wanted them to work for us after the war. Yeah, he like spread a bunch of disinformation and like got America embroiled in this crazy, costly event.
Sir, I actually don't. You're probably more educated in this than I am, but I actually think that I'm not sure if we would have gone to war, but there still would have been tensions over international communism, even if there were no atom bomb. Like there was international organizations dedicated towards like instituting communist coups, like in the 20s, for example, in the 30s. And that's one of the reasons why the Germans got so scared when they had the Depression, communist uprising. So I don't think. And I even know, I'm not sure about this, but I've heard that Stalin planned like a final like not an invasion, like he planned like a military strike. He wanted to like attack, but he died before he could like do anything like that. I'm not sure. I need to double check that, but like I'm not sure if I don't think if there wasn't even if there was no atom bomb, I think we would have won the war anyways.
No, yeah, we would have won the war. We just would have done it in a traditional fashion, and we would have had to rely on Russia a lot, the way we were relying on Russia a lot in Europe. Like we just would have had to continue partnering with them. It wasn't like we had to start partnering with them. We just need to continue the thing that everybody agreed on. We're all going to do this and do this together. And then Truman, right after FDR dies, Truman's like, I got a bomb. Like, I don't care. We don't have to do anything with you guys. You can just listen to us. We're not friends. We are the boss. Yeah, and probably, certainly more Americans would have died in that scenario. Certainly. And probably at least as many Japanese would have died. Like, and traditional incendiary bombs, like we firebomb Tokyo, we kill 100,000 people when we do that. It's totally comparable to like Nagasaki, but it's still not a nuclear bomb, right? Like, so at this point, the world's pretty used to bombs, but like releasing nuclear energy that way and then demonstrating to the whole world that like, A, we did this so we could do it again. And B, this is even a possibility. Like, so in the 1950s now, Americans start doing duck and cover drills under their seats and stuff. So like at school, it's like, oh my goodness, it just would have been a very different world. Not only had we not used the atomic bomb, but if we just never would have developed it in the first place, which is, it's impractical. The Germans were building a bomb. They were close to, they actually built a couple of small ones that they did some tests with. They just didn't have uranium. They didn't have the materials that we had. So, and they lost a lot of their best scientists and physicists when they kicked all the Jews out, who a lot of them came to America. Anyways, this is a good discussion on that stuff. And of course, we'll be coming up to all of these things. And I've actually been trying to figure out what to do about World War II, and you guys can maybe let me know what you'd like. So I've been porting the material I wrote from my Top Hat publisher over to Satori, trying to get those all updated. So you noticed if you were looking at the first 4 or 5, there's a lot more verbiage and detail and explanation and context, written context in there than there was at the beginning of the semester. I didn't write all that right now. I was writing that a year or two ago. I got all the way through World War II in my writing, and that's when the school told me I couldn't use my textbook anymore. And so I hit pause and haven't not picked it up yet because I don't have time and I'm not getting paid to do it. So I don't know when I'll find time to do it. So I have to figure out a little bit what I want to do post World War II for our class and material. But World War II, so the first chapter or section, the first thing on Satori is like 6,500 words, maybe 7,000 words. I think as we're going on, it probably gets up to like 10, 12,000 words. The chapter I wrote on World War II, I went totally over. I did like 2-day benders where I was just writing for hours. Like, it's 200,000 words. It's super long. Like, I'm like, oh, I want to maybe work on this material and kind of repackage it a little bit and maybe make it a standalone World War II text because there's just so much stuff in there. And if you guys are interested in that or like want to look at that or read through all of that, I'll figure out a way to make all of that available to you. Otherwise, I'll just be kind of taking the big main sections out of stuff there. But I wrote a lot for it. So because there's so much happening with World War II, so much build up to it. And yeah. Well, okay. So that's another story for another time though. What else do you guys have in terms of group projects that you'd like to spitball and throw up here for a sec?
Sir, real quick, well, like more of like 3 things, but 2 things. One, are people gonna like just sign themselves into a group, or are you gonna like negotiate it?
Yeah, it's all self-selection, and I don't want groups to be over 5. I mean, 3 or 4 is a great number. Easy to coordinate, easy to work through, easy to divide up work. Once it gets into 6, it's harder to do all those things. But I feel like inevitably with a 6 or 7 person group, some people just don't carry their own weight in it and kind of get away with it because it's easier to do. There's more people in it. Somebody will pick up the slack. And so I decided I'm going to do okay, so 2 things about points. I'm going to do class participation points. It's 10% of your grade. It's 100 points. I'll be giving them out at the end of the semester. And as long as you guys have been around, like you're getting good enough grades on things that I'm like, okay, well, you're in the material. I can tell you're reading and all of that. So as long as those, that's in play, you've been involved in the class for the semester. Not like you've been here every day or you've read everything I've ever sent out. You've been involved. That 100 points will be determined by your group. And I'll ask the group like, hey, who didn't pull their weight in here, or who blew stuff off, or who kept putting you off, and say, I'll get that to you. I'll do that until like the last week of class. And then you had to go do it yourself. That person will get 0 on participation points. So
how many people should be in the group anyway? I didn't really.
2 to 5. I'd say 2 to 5 is that's the optimal number. I am open to the possibility of people doing a solo project. I have to approve it. You got to talk to me about it.
A solo project. Okay, so
like by yourself. You're not in a group. You're just going to do it by yourself.
That I get. Yeah. But that's kind of hard.
You'll be judged by group standards. So if you want to put in all the work of 4 people into a big project and try to make it like as filled out and robust and thorough as a group with 5 people in it,
Mhm.
go for it. It's a ton of work though. It's so, you know, these, and when we're looking at a timeline on a subject like this, somebody else is going to see stuff that you don't see. I mean, you guys see things that I miss when we're looking at history, or you bring up points like, oh yeah, well, that was going on at this time. And I'm like, I forgot about that, or I didn't know that. So you might, you know, I was talking to Noah about this. He's got his mind wrapped around kind of like the idea about economics and following economic value and its change and kind of American institutions all the way through. But what I was explaining to him earlier is like, yeah, it's good if you do that and never talk about like the television in the 50s, right? Like if you don't talk about that and TV advertising and materialism, and you'll get docked on the project, even if the stuff you're saying is brilliant and right on. If it's not an interactive timeline with the rest of the world that's going on around these things, I mean, really, then it's like a Wikipedia page. It's like, oh, here's all the firsts in vaccine science. Here's all the changes in, American entertainment technology. I don't need that. I could go to Wikipedia for that. It's probably going to be a little interesting, but it's not the point of this project, which is, hey, follow an idea or theme through and all the way through this 150 years of American history, not on the history of this subject, like on American history. This is the line you're tracing through. So all the things that, touch it closely along the way are things you got to include. That's what I meant about like the moon landing and the world wars and Holocaust and stuff, because even if you're talking about something like vaccines, it's like, well, shit, man, we better talk about all the stuff the Nazis did and Dr. Mengele, and you're like, like, yeah, that should get in there too. Like the dark side of all of that, not just the like, hey, we had a breakthrough for here. Hey, we vaccinated polio. Hey, like those are all great, but they need more one idea stuff into them. And I'll pull up some student examples to maybe show you guys in a second here what's great and what's not great,
And Sarah, the other 2 things I want to mention is in terms of World War II, there's this book by Victor Davis Hanson. It's called The Second World Wars. And he takes the analysis you talked about earlier, how it's really a series of wars that build upon each other. He says we call it the World Wars because the reason why the Axis lost, in his view, is because they, like I already said this in an earlier class, they were well prepared for border conflicts. Like Hitler was well prepared for small wars in Europe, but the moment it became global, they literally could not win because they had enemies all around them. So I think you should, if you could buy that book and read it, or like maybe even deconstruct lessons according to chapters.
It's called Second World Wars.
Let me double check.
It sounds like a great book. I'd love to look at that.
Yeah, and he's a military historian, so he knows what he's talking about. Yeah.
I got like a topic idea, but I don't know if it counts.
Sure. Yeah. It's brainstorming. Throw it out.
Constitution, I guess, like the Constitution, I guess. Or like, does that count? Does that count?
Yeah, I mean, like, so it's a very big, broad topic actually that you could go in tons of different directions on. But looking at how our view and an understanding and interpretation and even like deification in some ways of the Constitution has changed over time. Of course, you'd be looking at quite a few amendments. There's amendments from 1865 up through. So those are in there. But like, if you were really going to look at the Constitution, it would probably be easier. I mean, if any of you guys are like pre-law or you want to do that, hey, dig in. Like you can go in through and give like deeper analysis on that and kind of our understanding of the Constitution. But for most of us that are not going to be lawyers or law students, you might want to pick a theme or like an article from the Constitution and follow that through, right? And so the Second Amendment, right? Gun rights is a super controversial subject, which will lead you into the world wars. It'll lead you into like organized crime in the 20s. It'll lead you to Columbine and terrorism, like, as well as like the rise of the NRA, gun rights being a politicized issue. Like, that's weird that it is. It shouldn't be. Like that is some, and you can talk on broader ideas around that, right? So like part of the problem with gun laws is they change wildly from state to state. So you're like, I'm packing, it's legal. I'm in Arizona, and you cross the border in California. Well, you might go to jail if somebody catches you with a concealed weapon on you. And other issues we've seen like that are complicated that way are slavery, right? Gay marriage, the legalization of marijuana. Like, you can't have pot legal in Nevada and then say and not have it legal in California, because everybody will just drive across the border and buy weed and bring it back. Like, that's not very effective. You can't have a marriage be legal in one state, but unrecognized and not legal in other states. It's kind of like inevitably we're going to have to go all in or all out with some of these things. So Second Amendment, like that, there's so many things you could talk about with that. So yeah, that I'm just going to leave it as Constitution now.
Yeah,
we'll come back to it and can.
It's an idea that just that's the first thing that popped in my head. I don't know if that's a good topic.
Yeah, that's great.
Because what you just it sounds a little bit hard.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. I think it'd be a challenging one, but like I said, if it's like that's something you're like, I'm probably going to be doing more of that for my future, my academic career, it would be worth digging into that.
Hey, Professor.
It was an idea.
I put the information in the chat. I put the title of the book and also two long interviews of him talking about it.
Oh, nice. I'm opening them right now.
Maybe you can maybe you can put them as homework. If you
I might include these in Satori. And they're only a half hour long, that's always nice. I always appreciate that. So cool, man. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you, Noah. The Second World War's Victor Davis Hanson. Great. This is excellent. Excellent.
Yeah. So would you recommend that you would not recommend someone go solo based on, you said you're okay with it, but you'd not recommend it essentially?
Yeah. Like if you've got like crippling social anxiety and like the thought of having to work in a group is just going to like make you have to take a bunch of Xanax every time you have to do it. Let's talk. We can have you do a solo project, right? If your life is crazy and you've got 4 kids and you're a single parent and you're working 12-hour shifts at the hospital or something like that, yeah, maybe doing a solo one might be okay. It's going to be a lot more work, but your schedule might be so crazy that it might just be impossible to really work that out very well. But short of like circumstantial things like that, I would say it's better for everybody to do it in a group because just for the reason of perspective. And then you can really divvy stuff up, right? So if you're in a group that's talking about like, what is American, or this idea of an Americanism and American values? Well, one of you could go like, well, I'm going to look at like the definitions and the literature and how people talk about and refer to the American dream over this time. And somebody else might go like, cool, I'm going to look at like patriotism and American flag garbage that we sell everywhere and kind of these, flag waving and all this stuff. Somebody else might go like, well, I'm going to look at like from the government and what they're saying is good. And somebody else might be like, well, I just want to take on pop culture and like get in there and look at pop culture from 1865 to now and try to figure out some things about what that's saying about what is an American. So you can like have a nice division of labor that allows you to actually kind of stay in the lane that you like and feel comfortable in and want to do research on, even if you're not jazzed about the entire project, or there's parts of it you're like, I do not want to do that. Somebody else can do it.
Professor, now there's 2 things. One is that now that you said that, can I add a topic that I probably want to do? It was the history of antitrust law, because it's narrower and I could specialize with it better and I can work with a team better. because economic value is gonna be like a personal, like, because what I do is when I write something, I often save it in Google Docs. So in future projects, I can cite it. But if this is a group thing, I want to be able to like, like, oh, you do this era, I do this era. You see, it's easier than just like a grand, like, small dissertation. I was gonna do it. Yeah.
So yeah, which is like the first one, it sounded like it could be a small dissertation. I mean, there's so much you could do in there. And it would warm my heart if we had 4 other students in here like, I'll take on economics with Noah. That'd be great. Like,
no, but like,
we'll have that though.
I wanted to spend like do nothing but it, but if you advise a group, I wanted to maybe be more specialized. And the second thing I wanted to ask was, how should we pick our group members? Like, will you just pick someone, or are you going to assign people, or how would you?
So as we're writing them down here in OneNote, I'm kind of just writing down, the brainstorming topics that we're saying right now. We'll go back up in a minute and start fleshing them out, filling them out a bit. And then the folks that either suggested that or right now are like, I want to do that. I want to do it with you. I heard you mention that. You can come in here and put your name in, and then you guys can work out like a pretty good description of generally what the group is going to do. So Constitution is just like, well, what does that mean? You don't know. If you have a nice little paragraph or a couple sentences underneath that, then students from the Monday group or people that weren't here, they can come in and look at that and go, oh, that looks good. I'd like to be in this group. And if the group already has 5 people in it, like, just go find another group. Or if you're like, man, that group's full, but I really wanted to do that topic, email me. We can talk, because there's so many different angles to approach things by that. Like, say you do something on, monopolies and antitrust laws and what's good, what's bad, how that's played out over 150 years. Somebody else might want to do something along that lines, but really look more specifically at corporations and the corporatization of America, and which would go, that'd go real nice with your timeline. You guys could even share notes and compare things. You could look at each other's timelines as you're making them. And like, so 2 groups could even work together, just do 2 different but complementary.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that, because the Law and Order kind of goes with what is American. And so I have like things to contribute to the Law and Order, but I don't know. I'm not really sure if I want to be in that group, but they will intersect at one point.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just jot down a few more. I think I saw a few in the comments here, actually. Let me scroll down.
I actually have
Amish space program. That I want to know more about that.
Professor?
Yeah.
I actually got an idea.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if it falls under the category of what you're looking for, but the occurrence of different pandemics throughout history. And
absolutely. No, I think that fits really well. It would, and it like, you might not even, because pandemics will take you out of America. Like, there's so many of them that like, like an epidemic at least is kinda, they're all over the globe like for 150 years.
And such.
You're a little quiet. I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Oh, like the Spanish flu and such, and including the coronavirus and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so yeah, the Spanish flu is, most people didn't really care about it when I talked about it previously, but now I think we're like, oh dear God, we need to know more about the Spanish flu. Like, this is really germane to our day today. So you could look at pandemics and like 2 roads that I instantly think of. One is kind of like public health and safety on like a medical level, which if there's like 1 or 2 people who wanted to do vaccines, but they don't have a big group, those could fit together, or you could look at it from like a sociology standpoint, like how do we handle pandemics and treat them and kind of social fear and all these different things.
I was thinking more of how it affected, you know, the US and just the people, you know.
Yeah. The challenge will be making that cover 150 years and not just like the Spanish flu and, you know, the Ebola
The
outbreak.
SARS,
Right,
bubonic plague.
So a broader, like a slightly broader subject. You wouldn't even have to change the word pandemic. You just might have to like get at the heart of that. Like how do pandemics, okay. So if I don't use the word pandemic and then you just say like, well, how does like a widespread, you know,
Outbreak
disease
Yeah.
affect how we deal with that and think about ourselves, organize our society? Because everybody's saying like society as we knew it's done, like a bunch of that stuff's never coming back, which might be true, which is so sad, but can't be the first time that's happened. Yeah.
Can we take a quick break, like a 10-minute break? It's like 7:30.
Yes, we do need to take a break. Let me just, before we move on, I'm in the comments and I just want to write these down and we can pick them back up in a second. Let's see, I see
How would you
evolution of technology. I see women's rights movement. What the heck? Oh, there we go. Women's rights. Serial killers, which I have got a story for you guys about serial killers when we come back.
Wait, that's a topic, serial killers?
Yep.
I actually want to do something like that.
Yeah. Well, like it's a subject that we're all very fascinated by.
Yes.
It's a weird product of modernity. And I have serial killers before the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
Dude, I took forensics before I learned some bit about killers.
I love that.
Oh, and then I also see in here surveillance. So like, yeah, talking about the how do we get to the surveillance state? Like, what did that look like 150 years ago? Boy, that'll paint a very, very contrasting picture. Like, oh, this might be one of the areas that we're the most different from 1865 in. So I'll just put that survey. Did I spell that right? Of course I didn't. So these are good ones. You guys can keep throwing stuff in the text or just munch on this for a little bit. Let's go ahead and let's take a longer break and go. We'll come back at 8 sharp and get going. I might pop on a few minutes earlier to keep spitballing with you guys on these things. So we'll take a short break, well, a little bit longer of a break, and we will we'll come back in 20. Sound good?